Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm really sorry for that. Yeah, so what I was saying was I work as a front-end developer in Atlassian. So before joining Atlassian, I was working with Sudhanshu like at HackerRank for like last 2 to 3 years. And I really thank Sudhanshu to have, to organize like these kind of sessions. Like, I mean, even the previous sessions has really helped me understanding like few of the internals of, what we think as a black box, right? So that has like made me understand like few of those things. So, okay. When Sudhanshu said like, we can like talk about something related to React Router or SPA, right? Even I felt, okay, yeah, so this is something because when I started, right, I started as a backend developer. Then eventually I started working in the JavaScript as well. So what happened was like, when I started, right, most of the apps that I worked was either into like hybrid mobile applications or something to do with the server-based JavaScript application, like not really a single page application as such. So and when I started like after like spending some time into like JavaScript, I was like I worked on a project which was completely on like Angular. So there I started using a concept called a router, and it was kind of a black box for me until like at some point of time I really looked into like what actually router is, like how do we implement a router. So what are these benefits that using a router will give us. So this session, I think the agenda will go like this. We will explore like what exactly a router is and the router fundamentals and what are the history API, like how we used to deal with the page navigations before history API was released, and how do we do it right now. Then we can go into like discovering, like writing a router or React router or like any other router implementation on our own. So that is the agenda of like this particular talk. Okay. So what I'll do is like, let me just share my screen. So let's go one by one. 1 minute.
First of all, how many of you are still uh, not using client-side routing? Like still based on the old server render thing, where on every click serve things from the back end. Yeah. So kind of like the now client-side routing has become the main thing, and most of the, like at least on the application level, you have uh, to do this to have a better experience. Though like there are certain gotchas with client-side routing thing, which and a lot of like a server render page, and then doing client-side after that word, the jam stack and everything are trying to solve the overall routing experience and like the page matching experience. But yeah, like the client side routing is the main way of dealing with the routing nowadays.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can share.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay. Guys can see my screen, right? I just like listed out what and all like we will be covering in this session. And after this session, like probably like I'll share it as a blog. We all can have a look into it. I like referred a few of the references as well, like what exactly this will be. So the agenda, as Sudhanshu mentioned, like this is kind of interactive session. Like where I would expect to rather than like me speaking or like Sudhanshu speaking, it would be good like if we can have kind of a conversation and figure out like if something that I don't know, like I'll try to learn from you guys as well, or if something that for few folks who are already who are into this call, right? Few of these things might be like very simple, but frankly, like when I started, right, I used to think React router or the routing solution is there, right? So that is kind of a black box. It's doing some kind of a magic. I really didn't know like what exactly makes a router what router is. Okay. So Okay. Before this, right, whether anyone wants to answer like what exactly a single page application is, anyone in the call? Hello?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I think for me, like single page application means like instead of like having separate JavaScript and separate like HTML for each page, we
Mhm.
have like kind of one page which gets loaded, and then
Mhm.
depending on the URL, we load something else and like show something else. Like basically, yeah, your page will not load when you move from page to page.
Correct, correct, correct. Yeah, that's what single page application is. So if you see, right, I have just added a link over here, like the go to, right? So you can expect like this link to have like three kinds of behaviors. Like when you click on this, right? What you can do is like, I mean, you can you can expect this to get opened in a new tab, or you can expect this to open in the same tab, or like, I mean, with the full page reload. So let me just, where did I move it? Uh, there's some issue, sorry. Yeah, I'm back. Okay. So uh, that's all. So I mean, a single link can be like when clicked on it, right? So we can like either open it in a new tab, or what we can do is like we can have a full page reload and like open it in the same tab. And the third way is like a smooth transition. I mean, as you mentioned, right, in case of like single page application, so only the data that is actually required for the uh, chain that you want to see, right, only that will be loaded, and there will be a smooth transition of the new page. Like if you see the Twitter UI or like any of the modern websites, right, so when you navigate using their navbar, so what exactly will be happening is like only the shell will be like kept as it is, whereas only the data that is required in the new page, right, only that will be loaded in the background. So that's where the single page application comes into picture. I mean, according to wiki, right, a single page application is nothing but any website that interacts with the web browser by dynamically rewriting the current web page with the new data from the web server, instead of a default method where we used to have this like reloading the entire page and like serve everything from the server, like from backend. So that's where this single page application comes into picture. So in order to build a single page application, right, so there are like few aspects to it. So what we need is like we need to dynamically, we should be able to like any user, right, he should be able to like dynamically change the URL from the JavaScript or the UI, or then like figure out like what exactly has been changed in the URL and fetch only those data that is required in the UI, or you should be able to like copy paste the new URL, like whatever you have, and you can share it with the other person, and on refreshing, like the other user also should see the similar page, like the intended page. And whenever you're doing this, right, there shouldn't be any full page reload. I mean, it shouldn't like there shouldn't be any full page reload. Only the data that is required for the page, right? So if you want that, only that should be loaded, or like everything will be like served from your client side itself. So that is what single page application is. So now, as you have mentioned, like the single page application, right? So then the URL becomes a very important thing for any single page application, because it is kind of a source of truth. So as I mentioned here, like you should be able to like share this URL with some other person, and even the other person should be able to derive the content using the same URL that you have shared. So URL becomes the what do you say, the source of truth for your entire application. So now what we will do is like let's dive into the location interface. I mean, any URL, right? It can be broken down into like multiple parts. So if you have seen,
But before this, Bharat, I just
yeah.
want to ask people a few things on like uh, why why a URL, having like a unique URL for every resource is important. So in an application or like earlier, this is a common thing we do, like we open some model or we change something, and it's just like a view change. But reflecting that on a URL, why it is required, apart from you are able to share it. Yep. Anshul, you can probably unmute yourself and you can.
Actually, I'm not in a very quiet place, so that's why. But yeah, so basically, URL are basically the state of your application, or basically state of truth where you can define your state of application using the minimalist information. For example, let's say if we talk about a Flipkart product, right? So the minimum information to recreate the same state of application is a product ID, right? So URLs are basically important to store the minimum information to recreate the same state of application.
Yeah, yeah. And apart from that, it also gives you back and forward thing inbuilt, so you can move toward into different state using just doing back and forward. You don't have to click again and follow the same step to get into the new state. So even sometimes it is advised, like if you are opening a model which has a good amount of content, you should reflect that on a URL.
URL.
So first of all, like you can share that, so people can directly open that model, and then again, like if you close it and if you want to reach on the same state again, you can just do forward or back to get into that state.
Yeah.
Correct. So if we think of the journey as the state of application, then that's where the push and pop also comes into picture.
Yes, yes.
Correct. Yeah.
In cases
So,
of network drops, I believe that like your web page suddenly disappears, and when you reload, the state of your application goes away. And it might be a good idea to persist the state of the application via a URL.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is a very valid point. Like even this is an example of if you are applying some filter, let's say in a Flipkart, you applied some filter for certain categories, and if you are just doing it on in memory, what will happen? Something happened if you refresh the page, and then all the filters are gone. Local storage, you can definitely do it on local storage, but keeping local storage in sync is very hard. Like if you move toward and backward, or if you have two tabs, then you can mess things up if you're using local storage. Then people can say session storage, but yeah, generally because there is just one source of like one thing which multiple thing can mutate, it's very hard. But with a URL, we have state for every route, like and all are on the stack. So it become much manageable with the URLs.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
for like if someone is having some network dropping issues and like the web page suddenly disappears and they get the network back, then they are safe to know that they are where they left and not like somewhere in the previous steps where they were. So that's also an accessibility issue for folks who don't have a stable internet connection.
Yep.
Yeah. And to answer like whatever Sudhanshu mentioned, right? I mean, you can store the state in the local storage or like session storage or anything similar. So natively, like the browser itself does something similar kind of a thing for us. So it's called session history. So I'll come to that, like what session history is like. I mean, how we can take advantage of the session history. So like, I mean, yeah. So before going into the session history, right? Let's have a rough look into like what exactly this location is. Like, I mean, any URL, right? Now, suppose if you see my URL, like developer.mozilla.org. Now, so this URL can be broken down into like multiple parts. So, I mean, this for any, so the same URL can be represented using a location interface as well. So this goes something like this. I mean, href is nothing but the string representation of the entire URL. Then there will be a host, the host name, or which port it is from. Like similarly, the path name is nothing but what comes after the first slash, right? So that is kind of called a path name, like using which all the most of the routing solutions are defined. So similarly, there will be a search. Search is nothing but all the query param or whatever comes after the question mark, right? So that will be like directly available to us as a location dot search property. Similarly, like we have a hash as well, like whatever comes after the hash. So that is also like directly available in the location object. So when you do, suppose if I again, like, yeah, this might be very basic, but I think this is what eventually will lead us to the actual routing solution that we are looking into. So now see window dot location, if I do, right, the current location. So the current URL is like broken down into, or the same has been represented in this particular location object. I mean, the host name is this, href is this, the path name is this, like similarly. So any router or any routing solution, right? Internally, it will be dealing with the location object in this particular manner. I mean, so that's how it happens. So that's what I've covered here. Similarly, now in order to like answer the previous question, like where I mean, the browser itself handles this, like the stores what exactly the user has accessed till now, right? So anyone wants to answer, like, or anyone has any idea like what session history is like, or what browsing context is? Anyone want to go about it, like? I mean, anything is fine. Like, what does like when you hear session history, right? What do you think? What it might be?
Session history would be like if we see the three buttons in our browser, like back, forward, and even the
Yeah,
reload. So
yeah,
basically, session history is like what are the URLs we have visited, and we are maintaining a kind of like list of maybe like list of URLs which we have visited
correct.
in some state or something. And whenever the user wants to go back or forward or reload a
Mhm.
page, we
Yeah.
can use that session history.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what it is. I mean, that's what session history comprises of. So ideally, right? I mean, see now this is a tab, this is a tab, right? So every tab you open, or like every iframe that you load, basically it constitutes something called as a browsing context. So, and whatever the current window object you see, right? When you do like window, so this object, this it kinds of represents the current browsing context. So this is what the definition says. So every browsing tab or every iframe that you load, right, whenever user is accessing a page, so that is nothing but a browsing context, and every browsing context internally maintains a stack. So that is called as the session history, and it keeps track of like the user has which and all page that he has accessed. Like suppose if I go from this page to this page, right, one more entry has been like pushed into the session history, a kind of a stack. So I mean, so this particular stack, right, it session history stack, it maintains like all the URLs that the user has accessed till now. So when initially it was launched, right, so there was no way like user can directly access the history API. I mean, the history, the session history stack, whatever you see, right. So there was no way to like directly access it. The only option that he had was like accessing it using location properties. So we have like, if you go here, right, window dot location, whatever you see, there are like multiple what do you say, the methods as well over here. So something called reload, replace, then there is something called assign, location dot assign. So uh, what these methods, the location methods, what it does is like whenever you call like window dot location dot assign, right, or whenever you do like window dot location dot a new window dot location dot href, and when you try to assign this with some other new URL, so ideally like behind the scenes, right, what it does is like, it will just add a new entry into our session history stack. Or whenever you click on some page, right, internally what happens is like a new entry will be pushed into our session history stack. Similarly, we have this method called replace. So replace, what it does is like the whatever there in the top entry, right? So that is kind of gets replaced with the new URL that we are trying to, access. So that's what the previous behavior was, and everybody was using window.location object like to do any kind of a navigation or like any kind of a stuff using like JavaScript, like window.location.push, window.location.assign. But the one drawback that this had was window.location API, right? Every time, like whenever you do, like whenever slash XYZ, whenever you do this, right, there was a full page reload. I mean, the entire page used to get reloaded. I mean, this is not kind of an ideal behavior, right? And the first thing that we saw, like there are three possible behaviors with any link. I mean, either opening it in a new tab or complete page reload. Ideally, these two steps should happen only when you are doing a complete context switch. Whereas, I mean, you're moving between websites. So only that should be the ideal case, like when these kind of a behavior should happen. But before the history API, I'll come to like what history API is. Before, till then, like this was the only way that we had. I mean, window.location, you manually like push into the history state using the location APIs. But the drawback with the location API was reloading the entire page. Even though like user was trying to navigate in this within the same resource within the same website, so still he was like having this kind of experience, like the full page reload, and in turn like you'll fetch everything from the server. That is kind of a very bad user experience, right? So that's what used to happen. So then what happened was, I mean, everybody started observing like, I mean, this is kind of a I mean, not a really good thing. So people started thinking about how we can like directly manipulate whatever there in the session history, right? Can we have a direct API around it itself? So finally, the specification, they came up with something called history API. So
Before that, Abbas
yeah.
asked, what is the location push method? Do you want to answer that?
Location
Push method.
Yeah, location push is nothing but location push will add a new entry into the session history stack, whatever we have, right? So whenever you do like location dot push, you'll be adding a new entry into the session history stack that you have.
Okay, like you were saying, it will reload.
Yeah, with the full page reload.
Okay.
So,
I have one question, Bharat.
Yeah.
So as you mentioned, we have a browsing context which maintains the stack of each and every URL that I've gone through. So programmatically, अभी हमारे पास जैसे back और front button है to go or move forward. तो क्या मेरे पास location object में there are some properties which could help me move forward or back programmatically, or can I see that stack? मतलब where can I see that stack?
Sure. I'll come to it. So the next one, like this can be accessed using something called history API, which came up with the HTML5 specification. So
just to add on, you can't see the stack, like what all entries are there, but it provides an API to go back and go forward.
Go front.
Plus, seeing the state of current URL, like if you have stored any particular state, and the location API doesn't have any state as such. The history API, which browser, I think that only has a state.
Right? You can even maintain a state, like you can tag a state for your particular page. Then what you can do is like whenever the user navigates between like the forward or back, right? You can extract the state information and like you can do the other stuffs with it. I'll come to it. Like there is a live demo as well, or like we can actually go through the few of the popular implementation of the code that we have. So if you see, right?
I have a follow-up question on Saloni as well. So just quickly trying to understand the session stack that you mentioned tries to maintain the forward and backward for every URL that you have, or in a way. So is there an expiry to the, like let's say I have 100 URLs open, will that session be always maintained, or like after a certain time the browser removes it automatically or something like that?
Okay, I mean, as per my understanding, I think Sudhanshu might correct, or like if anyone knows. So it is something for the entire browsing context, and it is some the entire context will be lost only when you close that particular context. So that is in case of the tab, right? When the tab is getting closed, or like when in the case of iframe, when we like unmount the iframe or remove the iframe. So that's when that happens.
Understood.
So till there, the entire session stack will be like kept as it is. And okay.
I have concern on there. So you are saying that when we close the tab, so history will be gone. But I just experimented with that. So history, if I open a tab again, same tab again, with Control Shift T, the history will be always be there. If I do push and pop again.
It might.
I think that is a special browser mechanism, right? It says like it will not delete it immediately. It will wait for some
I think it is waiting for some time, or yes, there should be some time.
Yeah, but I mean, if you see the stack, right? The stack, whatever you have, the entries that are getting made into the stack, that is very specific to the browsing context for the particular tab. And like any confusion there? Okay. So okay, I'll come to that point. Or anybody has used History API like before, like History API directly? Like I mean, under the hood, if you see, right, all the React might be, Angular might be, like, or whatever the routing solution that we use, right? Underneath, everything will be using this History API itself, like in most of the cases. So anyone has did anyone got this opportunity to like directly work with the History API before? So I mean, I just wanted to understand, like
I implemented a small client-side router from scratch, and I used the History API once. It was small, like under 100 lines.
Yeah. Cool. Sure. So let's go into it now. I think even Yash, like whatever you have found when you did, right? I think even you can share the same. So see, the problem with the location API that we had was underneath it was using the session stack itself, session history stack itself, but there was no direct way to like access it. I mean, it wasn't maintaining any like we couldn't associate any stack, the state with it. So that was kind of a problem. And all the methods that this location API gave, right? So that was like implicitly creating a full page reload, when that was kind of a bad, right? So based on all these feedbacks, so HTML5 specification, it came up with something called as history, like I mean History API. Now, if you see, right, when you do like window.history, so this is what the history object looks like. So there is something called, I mean, if you see with this XYZ, like I just navigated with the, like by manually triggering a push, right? So you can see like the length of this history is like 2. That means my history stack, it has like 2 values in it. The one was the previous URL, and when I go here, it will be lost. So see, I have 2 values in it. And scroll restoration, it's a property which will like enable us. I mean, whenever you like go to and fro, right, whether you want this scroll to be restored or not, like whether you want to do it manually, or like whether you want to like it should be automatic. Like that is what this field specifies. Similarly, like with every session history stack, right, or every entry, you can kind of associate a state with it. So as of now, if you see here, it's null. Like I mean, because even in the previous the push that I was doing, I wasn't like associating any state with it. But in all the modern solutions that we have, right, so they kind of like associate some value with the state as well. So, and this state can be like used for multiple purpose. Like I'll come back to it as well. So this is what History API is. I mean, the history object looks like. And if you check window.history, right, it comes up with a few of the properties. So let's just check over here. So it comes with the property called push state. It comes with the a method called push state. It comes with the method called replace state. Similarly, it comes with the method called forward or go. So I mean, you can like directly when you call like back with the value, right? So see, I mean, from JavaScript, you can trigger like either go to the back, or similarly, like when you do forward. So you can actually navigate into the next page, next entry in the stack. So all those things you can do. Similarly, there is a property called Go. So Go, what it does is like you can specify like the index or the relative number, like from which place to which place that you want to move. So suppose from this, if I add a relative number as like -1, a -1, it will be moved to the previous entry. Similarly, like when I do history.go +1, right, it will be moved to a new entry. I mean, so that's how it works. So this is kind of a benefit that we have from history API. And whatever these methods that we have, right, go, forward, or push state, pop state. So this will not cause any full page reload by implicitly. So that is kind of a benefit that we get from history API. Like suppose if you see, right, history API, if you see the API, it looks like this. I mean, for any page, right, this API is something called push state. I mean, you can push a new state into the session history stack, and you can pass like what data that you want to pass. Like as of now, I don't want to pass any data, so I'll just specify null, and the title of the page, and the so the one problem over here is like this, the title attribute, whatever we have, right, it's not been implemented by any of the browsers till now, it seems. I think only Safari has implemented, or like only the Safari has implemented it. So none other browser has actually implemented this. So that's what I read. I mean, if anyone, I mean, if there is any more new news or anything, you guys can correct me. But as of now, I think this is how the like normally, if you don't want to associate any data, right, we actually pass a null value to it. Then like title, even you can pass something, but as of now, it's of no use. And this is where you actually pass the URL. Like you will pass like XYZ. Yeah, okay, something you'll pass. And when you do this, right, see the page got navigated from this one to this one, and you can see there was no page reload itself. So this is kind of a benefit that we saw over here. I mean, the same thing could have been the same API. We could have, I mean, I'm repeating myself, but just to like, I mean, window.location. The previous API that we had was like .href. You could have like directly assigned it, or replace or push that we had, right? So all of these APIs were actually triggering a full page reload. But as you can see, like from the history API, right, you can modify the stack, but without having a full page reload. So this is where this new era of like single page application started. I mean, people started using this API to navigate between the page, and actually they weren't creating a full page reload, but instead like they were having a smooth transition.
So I have one question here.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is that so this means, right, that only the URL will change, and now the browser doesn't know, right, if my thing is a SPA or if it is a server, like if
Correct.
it should reload.
Correct.
So basically now it's a responsibility of JavaScript to do the changes.
Correct.
Okay.
True that. Okay. Yeah. It's now it's the JavaScript's responsibility to, like, I mean, identify these changes and take the necessary action. So see, like as you can see over here, right? So when you do like window.history.pushState or replace state, the actual URL got changed, but nothing happened in the UI. And this was kind of a drawback with the history API as well. Like history API was great. I mean, you could do the route changes without triggering a full page reload, but there was no way to like identify or listen to these events. I mean, whether the user is like navigating to a different page or not. So this was kind of a drawback that this particular history API had. Okay, so this was kind of a main drawback. I mean, users could use this API, but there was no way to like identify if he is like navigating to a new page or not. So that was not there. And there is something called pop state event. On pop state, an event will get triggered, like, but that happens like only when you like click on the back button or the forward button, right? So then we used to trigger this particular that event will get triggered. So if you are using the native implementation of the history, right? So which comes with the like, I mean, window.history when you do. So then you can listen to like only these kind of events. So that is the back event or the forward event. But there is no way, like as of now, a direct way to like listen to the manual push state or the replace state that you are doing. Okay, so that's where there are like lots of history implementations. What happened was like there are like, as you can see, there are few of the very famous history API implementations out there. I'll go through the code as well. Like, I mean, this is one of them. So React Training, they have a history implementation. We can see their code, like what exactly this history does. So this is nothing but a wrapper on top of the window.history, the history HTML5, the history API, whatever we have, right? But a wrapper on top of it, which gives us these additional features. Like you can actually listen to like what exactly is happening in the background, like the navigating between the pages, like all those things you can capture from here. Like any questions here? I think.
Yeah. So one more thing is that now from what I understand, right? I can change the URL using these two APIs. I have my what is it called, location API and my history API.
Correct.
Right, but they are changing it differently. But now I have like in the same browser back button, right? So then browser is also aware of like how this change was made. Let's say you changed from /xyz to /xyza.
Correct.
Right? Now when in browser someone is pressing back, then browser knows that this was changed using what is it called, like history API. So this should be a client side URL change. But if the previous back, right, some other back that was done using location API, then it will do actual refresh. Is it like that?
So actually, I'm trying to understand your question.
Yeah. So my question is that we have two ways of changing the URL.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
But when you press back, how does browser understand? Like does it remember how it was changed?
The browser will remember like how it was changed. So see, browser, when you click on this back, this thing, right? The only job that it does is like just popping an entry from moving to a previous entry in the session stack. So that's what it does. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter like, got it? No, did you get what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah. So you're saying that if I press back, it will remove the last.
Correct.
Change state that I did, right?
Yeah.
But what if my last change was not using the history API? What if my last change was using the location API?
Yeah. Okay. So there is a little deep understanding that even I want to have. I mean, you guys can correct. Very basics of it, kind of I understand. So ideally, what happens is like whenever you do this window.location, and whenever you try to like modify some URL, right? So whenever you're using this window.location, different HTTP referrer will be set, and actual request will be sent to the backend, and that information will also be stored. Whereas like whenever you're using this push state, so it there won't be like any call as such. And this the browser, the stack, whatever we have, right? So that identifies like these are like two different things.
And I think a browser can easily identify, right? If it is a from a location or a push state, they can have internal. I am also not sure if they maintain any flag for that, or it is based on a referrer or something. But it does, definitely it does, because when you are doing back, for normal push state, it will just fire the event. But for the actual location push state, it will do a URL change. So it does maintain the information about like from where that history push memory in the what it is called, memory history, right? So not memory history,
session history.
Session history. Yeah. So where that entry came on the session history from, so it must be maintaining that.
Yeah, I think internally that's what I mean. Because as of now we know that it works. Like if the push was from the manually clicking a URL, or like if it was from location API, right? So then the behavior with the back and forward button will be like different. It is just based on the current entry, like whatever we have. If the current entry was from the push state, then it will be a very soft transition. Whereas if the current entry was from the location API, then it will be a full page reload.
So essentially, basically, it's like browser is internally maintaining a session and then exposing set of APIs like history and location through which you can manipulate. But it basically has a common session and multiple APIs to navigate through.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. A browsing context will have a single session, and that session will have a single stack of informations and a set of APIs to like modify these APIs. I'm just like recapping like whatever I told. And then the location API will can access this session history stack, but with a full page reload. But with the history API, you can do the same thing with the smooth transition. So that is kind of a difference. I think we are all in the same page, right? If then we can proceed into the native implementation that we have, the other implementation that we have. So that the drawback that we had was a history API. I mean, there wasn't a native way to like listen, like if you're doing a push state, right, or whenever you're going like go back and forward, they give a on pop state event. But whereas in the other manual case, right, so there is no direct way of listening to the event. So because of that, right, there are like numerous libraries available outside where like one such implementation is this history. Yeah. I think it's Pratik, right? So
yeah, I'm muted.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there are numerous implementations of the libraries. I mean, the history API is available outside. So this is the one very basic implementation that I try to do, like for the demo that I'm trying to show over here. Like, initially, I thought like let's have a demo, like entire demo built in the call itself. But then again, like I have this experience where demo will like really go bad during
demo always fails.
Yeah, so. Always fails. So I just like spent some time like creating like what exactly these APIs, right? See, under the hood, any of the history API that you have, you might have seen in your code, like you might be using an API called create browser history or create memory history, like those kind of implementation. I mean, the functions that you might be using in your code, you might have seen.
Zoom a little bit.
Okay. Is it visible? So let me just, is it visible?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, okay. So see, the only drawback that we had with the history API was like whenever, I mean, not only, the main drawback that we had with the history API was like whenever you're doing a push or pop, right, or replace, right, so you couldn't do, you couldn't listen to those events. So that was kind of a main issue that we had. So now what happens is, see, this is kind of a very raw implementation. If you see the history package as well, like they have implemented something similar, but with the few advanced things. So see, what happens is like we maintain a listener list, and what we do is like we also give an API called listen, and what we do is like we just push all the listeners that is you want to listen to. So, and then you'll give a push API. Push API is nothing but what it does is like it will basically call the history push state itself with the same arguments, and manually it will trigger all the listeners that you have called with the current location value.
Just one point. I think in push we shouldn't check the length is greater than 0.
Yeah. Push is not required. Yeah, but I think in push also we might need, but again, like this is a very basic code, right? Okay. So it might not be required in this example, but that's what I mean. In the actual code, right? We should have like a check like this in order to. I mean, there might be like few cases where you will be like avoiding manually triggering a listener or something like that. Like then you might need these kind of things. But again, like this is a very basic example. Yeah, we can get rid of this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is a very small this thing. So what I'll do is, let me just what I'll do is like I'll just add this to the global window dot my history, to as create my, I'll create a of this, and what we'll do is like, let's open this in a new tab. So this is the demo that I have, but now if you see, right, window.my history, if you do, so these has these particular methods like push, listen, and this thing. So whenever you do push, if you do, and if you try to trigger it with the similar params /xyz, right? Yeah, I think there was a debugger. See, what it does is like it will internally trigger the push state, and okay, so my history dot there is listen API, and what you do is like you'll just listen, you'll just log the whatever the value that it is giving, and whenever you do like push, right, you'll actually like logging what is happening. So this is kind of I mean history APIs that we have out there, which is kind of a wrapper on top of the window.history, the history API specification, and which gives us this listening functionality as well. And this is kind of what do you say, the root or the backbone for like all the routing solutions out there, like the history. Because with this, right, you can push a new thing, you can replace it, and now you can even listen to like what is getting changed, and take some necessary action with it as well. So
I have a question here.
Yeah.
So does the history API doesn't give us a stack information. It just gives us method to move forward or backward, right?
Yeah.
So does this history custom JavaScript implementation keeps their own history stack, or they don't do it like a
okay. Okay, yeah, I'll come to it. So we have like, if you see, right, so there are like multiple kinds of routing solutions, if you see, right. So we have something called browser history, if you have seen, and we have something called memory history, and we have something called hash history. Okay, in case of browser history and hash history, right, maintaining a separate info, it's not required, because URL itself is a source of truth. And whatever you have, right, you are just I mean you're mapping this URL itself as your source of truth. And like, I mean, there is no it's not at all necessary to like create a duplicate of whatever is there in session history and like maintaining it in
actually
JavaScript.
I can see one place where that might break as well, like if you are interacting through normal API, like if you're interacting through push or go of your router, it would work. But if you're directly interacting with a location API or doing push stat directly, the memory, the session history and your stack would get unsynced. Like a
correct. It does break. Yeah, correct. It does happen, because I mean one thing, even like initially when I started, right, I just had this doubt as well. So I just went ahead and like I thought like, oh, everything will be the native implementation of history API itself, and then I started doing a manual push into the push state, but that wasn't doing anything. Like, I mean that is there, like that is there right now as well. I mean, you can directly invoke like window.history.push state, but your front-end application that you have designed, right, it might not be aware that you have used the native implementation. Obviously, yeah, that will break. So that is there. And we have something called this memory history, right? In memory history, we actually maintain like whatever, because memory history is actually useful when you want to have a routing solution to work in a non-browser environments, something like Node, or when you want to like write integration test and you want to run this thing in a Chromeless head browser or like somewhere.
Server-side rendering.
Server-side rendering while developing the isomorphic apps. Then you might require this memory history, because you expect everything to run as it is. And this session history, even you will be assuming like session history will also be there in the environment that I'm running, right? But ideally, like behind the scenes, this memory history will be creating in-memory kind of a stack for ourselves. So in case of browser history and hash history, so it is not necessary, and it will consider the current session history stack, like window.location, right? So that itself has a the source of truth. Whereas in case of memory history, you actually need to create a separate source of truth for you. So that's what it happens.
One more question about like the listener you showed, right?
Yeah.
So here, now if you use your push tail, like push or pop method, that will trigger the listener.
Correct.
That is fine.
Yeah.
Now, but now, let's say if you have pushed some URL, right? AVC. Now, if I do back using the browser navigation button, then will that listener get called? Like in your current implementation?
Correct. Okay. So that's what okay. So see, if I can go to my implementation, right? See, this is a very basic implementation. This has something called listen, push, and replace, right? So then there is something called in the actual implementation, you see, there you do something like this as well. So what you do is like add event listener, and you will be listening to an event called on pop state.
Okay.
Got it, no? And what you do is like internally this inside the on pop state, right? You'll be like manually triggering these listeners as well.
Okay.
Got it, no? So what will happen is like when you do like push state and push and replace, internally it will call all the listeners. Similarly, like there will be a on pop state event also that will be listening, which will also call the listeners as well. So
there is also for on push state and on replace state, or only for on pop?
Pardon? No, it's only for on pop is an event. On pop is not a method.
Right. This is also for push and replace, or only that is there for pop?
It is only for the pop.
Okay.
That's what push and replace, right? So you'll have to like manually call the this one, so that internally it will call.
But if I go forward using the browser navigation?
Yeah, then also when you do like go forward, right? Then also the pop state will be triggered. Okay, it is little confusing. So don't go by the term like pop state. It's not actually popping. So pop state will get triggered like when you go back as well as when you go front. Basically, the entry is like getting changed. So let's.
Yeah, Bas, you are into this thing, internals of specifications, right? You probably should answer like why the name is pop state.
Yeah.
I don't know. Actually, this is the HTML specification. I have not read that one. So.
Okay. Yeah. So let's just see. This is the single file, like where we have the complete whatever the few liners that I showed over here, right? Which is nothing but a wrapper implementation. So now all the model, the React router or anything. So internally it will be using this history API itself, and this is what the entire implementation looks like. I mean, a single file. If you see, there is something called create browser history. We'll just look into the browser history. Similarly, you will see memory history as well, like in the same implementation. And we can just have a look
into this as well a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. So what we do here is, let me just check the. Okay. So the one to your question, right, Abbas, right? You asked.
Yeah.
So window.add event listener, we are listening to this pop state event as well in the code. Whenever you do this create history, right, you'll actually listen to this pop state event as well, and you trigger the same handle pop, and inside the handle pop, right, I think handle pop is in the top. Yeah, handle pop is in the top, and inside the handle top, you are actually triggering that listeners as well. I'll come to this apply.txt implementation as well. So this is how the handle pop happens. Similarly, when you do push, right, or push or replace, so this has both. Let's look into one of the code. So when you do like browser history.push, what exactly it does is like, in this case, it uses something called state as well. Like we have seen, right, the native implementation, if you see, that takes like 3 parameters. We were passing like null till now, but these, the implementation, they use history state as well to store like some route specific data or the URL specific data. So it's not much. What they store here is like they store the index, and they store something called, they store the index and they store the key Also, like if user is passing something, right? So they store that as well. Let me just see.
I think they also store the scroll positions, right? Or scroll position internet browser takes care. Because for normal location, I know that scroll position is taken care by the browser.
Yeah.
But for things we are manually pushing for URLs, we have to manually push the scroll positions.
So that's what. So when you do so when you're pushing an entry, right? I just showed you here, window dot location. When you do, not window dot location. Sorry, window dot history. History here, right? So see, this has like scroll restoration auto. Okay. Now you are pushing a new state into the history object, and its value is set as auto. Then browser itself will take it. I mean,
this works for push state as well.
Yeah, this works for the push state as well. So now if you see this, this is like window.history, right? This is the current representation, current entry, the topmost entry in the stack. So this guy, whoever has pushed it, right? He has pushed scroll restoration as auto. Then he has pushed some value into the stack as well. You can see like some value that this particular GitHub page they have pushed. And it's like purely left to the actual router or like someone who is consuming this, like what he will do with this data. So now if you see the implementation, right, this implementation, like whatever we were having a look into, so he was passing like history state, then this is empty. And if you check this history state, this is nothing but, yeah, 1 minute. Okay, so where did it go? Okay, history state, it is nothing but, this is how the state looks like. They'll just maintain an index. And this USR is nothing but whatever the user has passed into the state, right? You might have seen in your application when you do like router.push, a method will be there, right? So normally what we do is like we pass only one param, like router.push with the single param of which URL we want to pass. But ideally, like that will accept one more parameter as well. That is called the state, the user state. So this is the user specific state, and this is some random key. And this is the index of the stack that we also like maintain over here. It starts from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how it works. And Sudhanshu, initially you mentioned, right? I think we can maintain the stack in the session storage or local storage as well. See, ideally what happens is like history API comes up with the session history stack for us. And that has this feature of like having a state associated with it as well. Correct, right? But there is a limit to this particular state. I think it's 640 characters or that's it. When you JSON shrinkify it, right? It should be like 640 characters or so. Only that should be the length of it. But that's what. In most of the cases, it should be okay. But imagine a case where you want to associate some very big data with it, but the native history state is very less for you. Then what you do is like these thing, right? So they have like key also over here, right? What do you say? Where do you see the keys?
So they store it separately, like an object.
Pardon?
So they store it separately in a JavaScript object or something.
Yeah, no. They create some key over here, and what they say is like this key can be used to like associate some data with it. So I mean, what you do is like you use this key and like store. Like I think it's there in the key definition as well, like somewhere. Okay. This is a Unix tree.
There was that, right?
No. This is state.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this one. Correct. So unique string associated with the location may be used to safely store and retrieve data in some other local storage API, like local storage. So that's what. So this the native implementation, right? It comes up with this with the limitation of just 640 characters. If you want to associate a very large data, right? Then what you do is like you use this location key. Then what you do is like you create a map in your local storage or session storage, and you store your bigger data over there. And whenever the user is like manually going to and fro between the pages, right? Everything, it will yield a new object. and from that state you'll extract like what key it has, and you'll read from your local storage and you assign to it. So this is how the flow looks like if you want to associate a bigger data.
And does it maintain that we have also one handler called listen before? So
okay, yeah. I think, yeah, so the listen before and all, correct me if I'm wrong. So it comes up with the, like, I mean, I think the React Router 4, I don't think it has those kind of an implementation, the router above like 4. So only the older solution, React Router 2, Router 3, I think those had these implementations as well. If you see this create browser history, right? Create browser history. So whenever we do like, whenever the user calls push state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we don't actually go and call the push state like directly. We kind of check whether we want to allow these transactions or not. I think this is the place like where you can have like multiple
got it.
Before listeners as well. Yeah,
you can name it anything. It's just that before pushing, you just check whether it is a valid transaction or not.
Correct.
Then you do that.
Correct. Yeah. So that's what I think. You can have a hook which will return like, I mean, hello transaction will also be fed with the same data, and then you can like consume this and check like if this is a valid transaction or not. If not, right, don't do anything. I mean, this will be just skipped. The actual page navigation will not happen. So this is kind of a good use case. I mean, if in your app, right, you want to like prevent in-app navigations in some places, right? You can have some kind of blocker.
Yeah. Or even some places we want to check like for authentication use case. Before navigating to this, we want to check whether user is authenticated or not. And if it is, if they are not, then redirect them to login.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. That is the best use case as well. So, okay.
I have one like little unrelated question. Is that let us some websites, right, LinkedIn and everything. If I Google search something, right, someone's profile, I go to LinkedIn in mobile web, right, and if I press back, first it goes back to linkedin.com, then it goes back to the actual Google search, right? So it adds like a page in between. How does that work?
So I think the referrer, it's what you're saying. I think when you
actually like if you can search right now, right? If
okay.
You search someone's name, LinkedIn, anyone, your profile only.
Okay, I think inside the LinkedIn, you mean?
Yeah, search here.
Yeah.
Let's say, yeah, go to his profile. LinkedIn does that, GitHub maybe might not do that.
Okay. So that's what, right? So in most of the cases, what will happen is like there will be like, if you see the actual link, right? So in order to like capture the analytics or like those kind of stuff, actually they take you to their website, and from there they actually navigate to they'll give a 503, I mean not 503, 301 to the actual page.
Okay.
So I think this is what you're saying.
I think this is more of like a the LinkedIn specifically wants it.
Yeah.
So they might be doing multiple push state. Like instead of I have a point to cover at the end. This is usually a bad practice that whenever you are replacing, instead of a replace, you are doing a push state. So instead of a redirection, they are doing a push, because of which there is now 2 entry instead of 1. And the back would take it to the intermediate state instead of taking it to the previous state, like from Google to profile. There is an intermediate state which might be LinkedIn.
Okay.
It might be intentional, but usually that's a wrong practice to have an intermediate state which a user don't see.
But I think they do it willingly, right? But how do they even do it? That is sort of my question.
You can do, right? Like instead of whenever you are clicking something in a URL, you can push a new state. So you can redirect to a new URL. Now redirect URLs by default, like a browser redirect, are taken as a replace of a history, your session history. But if you are doing just go to this page instead of doing a redirect, so you are doing 200 status to 200 next page status, then it will be treated as a two different URL instead of a redirect.
Oh, you're saying that this is not a JavaScript thing. They're doing it from the server response.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, I have seen this in number of places actually. I think I just saw, like, if I can see it in a Twitter, like normally when people end up like loading some other page, right? So what they do is like, yeah, that's what they'll take you to an intermediary page where you like then from there like you redirect it to the actual page. So, but normally it was done using like 301, like I mean giving a redirect response from the server itself.
If you do a 301, then it will not have any intermediate state. Session history will not
correct.
That particular state. But there is no 301. That's why there are two.
Yeah, correct.
And you're just pushing a new URL into that.
Correct. Yeah.
If that happens, right? If your server sends a response, which is why your like redirection is happening, then when you press back, right? Then again your page should reload. Like my question is, right? When I'm going to that LinkedIn URL, specific link, profile URL, while going, I don't see any reload or anything, right? It goes directly to the correct page. But when I press back, it does a SPA kind of reload to just LinkedIn.com. It doesn't do a whole refresh.
They might be handling the POP state or.
Hey, actually, if time permits, right, we can actually look into this. The Abbas, if you have screen, like we can just have this
on browser on like on not. Okay, you can continue.
Yeah, let's do it on last.
No, I mean, what we'll do is like we'll try to debug whatever you're seeing as well. I mean, we can look into the stack info, like if there is anything, then we can check like why it is happening like that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, whenever you do that, right? So you can just check the history length. I mean, how many entries that my history has. Like, I think if they have like multiple entries over there, right? That means they have triggered it. I mean.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. So now that's what I think we have covered, like the browser history and memory history. Memory history will also be like something similar, but instead of pushing into the window.history.pushState, what you do is like you actually maintain a in-memory array, yeah, or stack, yeah. Okay. Then there comes the hash history. Hash history is like nothing but again like well, I mean, you'll use the location has this hash part, right? It will be like based on that. I mean, based on that, you'll be having a entire your history process working. Okay. So now what we'll do is like our next thing. I'll come to the actual implementation. Now, if you see this React router, right? So if you have like React router, and they are like the basic implementation. Or I'll just go to this itself. Okay, so this is like when I started, see, this is how the normal, like if you have used React Router 4 and above, right? This is how the normal router or you code in React, right? Basically, I mean, you specify a router. Then what you do is like you specify the routing path. Like for this page, I want this component to be rendered. For this page, I want this component to be rendered, like something like that to do. Then there will be I mean, instead of using the normal anchor tag, you'll give a link tag or the anchor tag that has been given by your routing solution. So that's what you do, right? Then like what will happen is like you'll just, okay, we can change this API. Here you'll actually pass the history. I mean, this can be like, this is dependent, like you can either directly use the browser router, memory router or anything. Or what you do is like you'll use the generic routing solution and you specify like what kind of history that I want to have here, whether it should be a browser history or like what is it like. So this is just a very, again, minimalistic app that I try to implement this router, route and link, but using the native history API out there. So we just saw like, this is how the history looks like this, right? Create my history. Now here, what I'll do is, I'll use the same history. I'll create it should be a singleton, because ideally if you see in the background, right? So each browsing context should have like only one session stack, right? Similarly, like your entire app should have like only one history stack defined for you. I mean, this might be like not true for this case, but imagine like isomorphic app, or like when you're creating a memory history, there should be like a single history instance for the entire app that you're running. So you like just run const history, create my history, like whatever.
I just want to correct there.
Yeah.
In the like a server side rendering, you have to create a different instance for every request.
Request, yeah, correct.
But like in a browser, because it's a one session, you have to maintain just a single instance.
Yeah, no, but again, there in the server side, it's for the different requests, right? But for a single request, it should be a single one.
For a single request, it should be only one.
It should be a one. I think, Sudhanshu, you can also explain. Did you face that issue, like when you, there was kind of a memory, okay, not here, right? It was something else. There was a memory leak, like where we were like having multiple, it was not related to the router. Yeah, sorry.
It was not related to here. It was related to React router, but so in a React router earlier, like in a V3, they had a few variables as a global variable because everything was a singleton. So even in a server side, for all requests were sharing the single listeners method. So like as soon as your request goes, your listeners will have a lot many information, and it was taking like there was a memory leak there, because of which our server was getting it was getting blocked. So that one fix we had to do on a React router itself.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, let's go and see the implementation. Like if you want to implement a very minimalistic router, right? I mean, how does it look like? So I have just specified how the API should look like. We'll just specify like for this path is matched, I'll render this component, and there will be like link entry. So you can see like this is working. Like when I click on page 1, it is working as expected. Now let's look into the implementation for it. Okay, so the main thing will be like this. Like when you like whenever you're using a routing solution, right? You'll not use the native anchor tag, but instead you'll use a solution that is provided by the routing. Like let's look into a very basic. Like this might not be like proper, like if you just see the React code or something. But like here, what you'll do is like you'll actually render an anchor tag, and you'll manually assign an on-click listener to it, but you'll prevent its default behavior. That the default behavior will be like location-based approach, right? If you add any link to your page, right, and if you try to click on it, internally it tries to do this location.push or location dot this thing. So what you'll do is like you'll try to prevent the native behavior over here. Then instead what you do is like you will trigger the push API from the history API. I'll see like what exactly, how does this look. But ideally, like if you're seeing any link implementation, right, React, so there will be, you might see a code which is similar to this, where you'll prevent the native the navigation that is happening, but instead you'll trigger your own the push state that you want to do. So that's how it happens over here. Then the main router, right? The router, it would look something like this actually. So what you do is like you'll create a common context provider, where what you'll do is like you'll pass the history API, history that is coming from the props. So in my case, it is coming from the create my history, right? I pass it from the app.js here. So that will be like passed, so that like all the child, like any route or any link, if it wants to access the history, right, it will be like available from here. Similarly, you will pass the location as well. So the current location. So current location, yeah, this again, this code might not be proper. This is like hardly spent much time. Like I just executed this like before this call. So that's what location, what it does is like, I mean, use state window.location. a current location based state will be created. And this is the history.listen, like which comes from our listen that we have, right? We will just specify like history.listen. And what you do is like whenever the location gets changed, right? And that will happen only when you do push or pop, right? So what you do is like you'll change the, you'll set that as the state, like set location as the state. You can see over here, like in this case, I had to like do this dot 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 location. But ideally, like what will happen is like you'll not be storing this location as it is and passing it as a prop to the underlying elements. But what you do is like you'll create like we saw here, right? In the history API, the whatever the location that he had, that was kind of a custom interface that they had. So similar to that, an interface will be there, and there like we'll be doing this, and we'll pass these two values to the context router context provider. We pass the history as well as we pass the current location object as well. Then there comes the last and final component, that is our route. Route, what it does is like it will use the router context that we have defined on the top, and what it does is like it will just check if the context like this is like just for my testing purpose, a single string comparison I'm doing. But ideally, like in this case, in the actual routing solution, right, actually a parsing will happen and you check whether it is actually matching the condition that you have specified. Only then the component will be rendered and understood, right? So here, like what we do is like we just check like use context, router context, and we check like a hard check, like if the path name is equal to the path that we have specified, right, then render the component, either else render null. Like this is kind of a check. Now, if you see this app, right, the flow again to explain, like when you click on link, it won't do anything, but it will call the history.push, like this history ka push it will call, and that will trigger the set state of the router, and which will give us the new location, and that will be available like across all the child components. And the route will have access to the location object, and location it just check if the path is same as the path that are specified here. If so, render whatever you have passed over here. So this is how the very minimalistic implementation of a React router would look like. Any question here?
Yeah, Bharat.
Yeah.
So I have a question. So how does your implementation of React router differs from the implementation of framework like Next.js? So I'm assuming like they are using the same history API.
Yeah.
But the way they might be mapping history URL with the page might be different, right? So how does like that happens exactly in the context of Next.js framework?
Next.js router, I haven't seen it actually. I mean, I haven't worked on it. If you can give some context, like what exactly the change there will be, like then we can like figure out.
So in Next.js, what we do is we don't define any routes. Like here we declaratively say route. If this is the path, then which component should be rendered.
Yeah.
But then in Next.js, we have, we in Gatsby or Next.js, we create pages. Yeah. And that pages get automatically mapped to the route.
Okay.
File system based routing.
Yeah, it's called file. Yeah, file
so how
system
does that
based.
differ from this implementation? I'm not sure, like totally. That's what.
So probably
okay. Yeah, Sudhanshu, you can answer. Then we can talk on it.
Yeah. So what Next is doing is like it is extracting your route information. This route information is just a configuration, right? That you are passing some history API, and for a given URL, you are rendering some component. So it's just a map. For this URL, render this component. For this URL, render this component. The Next.js is also doing the same thing. It is creating map, not by a route definition, but the folder structure. And the folder, the component, the page component becomes the component. The folder path becomes the path, and it serves the same endpoint, like it serves the same mapping. So if you go to this router.js, can you go to the router.js?
Yeah.
Just show the route.
Yeah.
Thing. So there probably it would not be route component, there would be a different wrapper runtime, you can say, where they provide your mapping of a link to a component, and from there you identify like what all components are there and then render. So underlying implementation would be same. It would be using the history API only. On the server side, they will be using the memory history, and on the client side, they hydrate your memory history on the client side. So you have the same information, like what is the path name, what are the URL params, what are the query params, and everything. And on a browser side, they initiate with the same hydrated history data. And it will do the mapping on the client side as well.
Yeah, I mean, to add on to that, right? So I think it's called something called convention based. I mean, if I'm not wrong, it's kind of a very common pattern. I understood like what you meant by the location. So I mean, if you ask me to like implement a similar solution, right? How I feel is like, I mean, see, we won't be having a manual place like where we'll be specifying the route. But what I do is like, when I try to run build this particular project, right, I'll have access to the complete folder structure, like how this folder structure is defined, right? So what I'll do is like while building, I'll create one more runtime, and where I specify like my folder had like these pages, and these internal pages had these components. I'll just create a a small runtime like this for this page. This was the component. Then like this route matching, whatever we had right in the this thing, instead of like going over this, what I'll do is like I'll iterate over the JSON or the runtime that I have, and I'll render this specific component. Obviously, but in the real time it will be much complex. But yeah, this is the high level. Like I mean that's what I can think of.
Okay. Got it. Got it.
Yeah. So, okay. So let's, that's what. One more thing that I had for this session was, now see, we saw the custom minimalistic implementation of the history, and we actually digged into their API, and we saw the how actual implementation differs, right? Similarly, we can just check React routers, how the actual implementation would look like. So now the router, if you see, so this also should have a similar this thing. I think this was this will also have, I think somewhere in the context, right? They're providing.
They have a lot more things.
Yeah. It's here. It's here. Yeah. In the router context, right? They'll be providing multiple this thing. I think yeah, that is not the right file. I wanted to check this routing route. Or it seems like I opened a wrong implementation altogether. The older implementation. Yeah, this is the one. Sorry for that. One minute. You guys can see, right?
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah. So see the route implementation that we had, right? It works in a similar manner. You'll just connect to the consumer, and inside the router context consumer, and inside that, right, you'll have access to these multiple things. The location, either the location that is specified in the route itself, or which is coming from the location. Similarly, you do a similar stuff. In my case, it was a very minimalistic check, right? If the path location.path name is equal to the path that I have specified. Whereas in this case, you can actually check like this will trigger a match path. And here, this is kind of a, actually like how this regex, whatever the path you'll specify the regex, right? How that happens. I'll ping these resources like in the doc that I'm creating as well. You guys can have a look into it. Like,
I just want to add one thing. Probably are we going to parsing topic as well, like how the parsing happens, or?
No, I think yeah, Sudhanshu, you can continue from here itself, like the parsing, if you want to explain.
Yeah. So I don't have anything to share right now. I just wanted to tell. In a URL, we have multiple type of state information. For a URL information, we can say one URL information we keep within the path name, which we call as a URL parameters. And that is consisted of like a if you see the current URL, so we are on github.com, React training, React router, and then slash we have a commit ID, or this might be this is probably commit ID, and on that commit ID you have packages. So these are basically resource paths, and our resource path we call it as a URL parameters. Now within a GitHub, probably they might be listening to your URL parameter. They might be checking like what URL parameter is and what the file you are trying to open, and based on that open a specific file. And then the other type of the information you keep it on query parameters. So query parameter, the question mark and something. So in that, path name remains same, but the query string is changed. I have one question here. If you change the query, just the query, not the path name, will it push on your history, like a session history or not? Will it maintain on the session history?
Yeah, it should maintain in the session history as well. I mean, my understanding is like, because if you consider a URL, right, whatever there in the URL is also constitutes its, I mean, because by sharing a query param, by sharing a URL which has query param, the other user also should be able to like see what was there in the this thing, right? So it should like, I mean, it should be there in the I mean, we should store this data as well, but in the session history stack, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, like definitely. They each query param change is a different entry on a session history. So that's why if you do back and forward, you can do for a query parameter change as well, not just the path name change. Similarly, like we have the third type of storage on a URL, you can say, which is your hash part. So you can just change the hash part. You can keep your path name same, but your hash will change. So these are the three things which we normally use on our application. One being URL param, the second is query param, and third is hash param. And like there are different regex or a pattern you can provide for URL params, like a colon something is treated as a URL param. Okay, can you show some example, or you can, if you can just type because you're sharing the screen.
What do you want, Sudhanshu? Okay, you mean like the different params of...
Yeah, so the pattern where we specify the path, right? So we do colon slug.
Yeah.
So colon slug means like the slug can be anything, and it would be stored on a
this one, right? You can like
something like this.
Slash page 2 slash colon ID. So now
probably like this. So basically what it would do is like when it is matching the route, it will take information from the route. It will match do a normal string comparison, and wherever it finds this particular block, it will add it in a variable or a property of a URL param called ID. Now one thing we usually do wrong here, like we keep a very generic URL param names, like colon ID or colon something, which is a bad practice. Instead of that, we should keep some very specific name for this thing, because our URL param is a shared information for all routes. So if any other route is listening for the same param name, it might get confused by the different information. Like, can you share me this URL, and I'll share my screen?
Okay, sure. Just added it in.
Let me close my. Okay. Can you see my screen? Can you people see my screen?
Yeah, yes, done.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So what I was mentioning is like a we have a complex we can have a complex patterns for our URLs, like when we say this ID, right? As I mentioned, like this our actual URL will be mapped with this string, and whatever is in this location, it will store it on a ID parameter called ID, and that information will go on something called URL params. In like in a React router, it is called just params. And params, you will have an object with all the this column something provided. Like you can have a column ID, column something. You can also do some different type of patterns. This means this is optional. Probably this would not be optional. You can mention that your something parameter is optional. You may provide it or you may not provide it. And there are different type of these patterns. But what I was mentioning here is like one common mistake we do is naming these parameters, because these parameters are shared across application, and our if I am storing on the page one as well, I am calling it as a ID. So what can happen if my component which is shared between page one and page two, if they both have connected to this parameter object, they might get confused with this ID value. So in a page one, this ID might be a book ID, and in page two, this ID might be a library ID. But your component might get confused by that what actually this ID means. So it's always a good convention that we shouldn't be using these generic names, because the parameters are global for the application. So we should say book ID or library ID here. So this was one thing I wanted to point on the params, just like a some good practice type of thing.
Yeah. Also, like one more point to add here is, I mean, if you are creating a reusable UI, right? I think this is a issue that I faced as well. So in one of the code base that I was working with, so what happened was like there was a path which was, I mean, something similar to this. I mean, slash something colon slug. Slug was something that we were using. And what happened was like after some time we realized this is a reusable component, and I want to move this component to some other place. So what we did was like we copied that component to a different place and we started using it over there. But I mean, after some time we found, I mean, we were using this colon slug inside this component, and the new place wherever I was using there, right? So there also like a slug param was used. So that kind of that's what it's always good to have a unique param name for the key name for your params.
Yeah.
Sudhanshu, I'll just share one more thing. So can I?
Yep.
Yeah. So let me just. Okay. So I was showing this, right? Where did it go? Okay. Okay. So inside the route, like when we saw, so it was triggering, like in my case, it was like path equals to path name, right? But ideally, like what will happen is like it will trigger this a complex function like this match path. and match path, the actual the thing will happen. So I just saw like we are using a library called like path to regular expressions. So what it does is like this is a generic library again. So whatever the format that this path is in, so this will convert it into a key based, like the bar is what, the value is what, like this. So internally, if you see in the code here, right, what they are doing is like they're converting, they're doing this compile path, and they're calling this path to regex, and they'll extract like all the params from it and the regular expression from it, and then they'll check if the regular expression whatever is there, right, if it is matching the path name, then the match will be true. If it is not matched, then this will return null. That means the route will not match at all. If it is not this thing, right, then they'll go ahead with the creating an object. Like that object will now have like all the values the URL parsing has given, like key name and the values, this thing.
Yep.
So if you see, like we came from here, right? Here, that's what the check is. Like what you do is you just check, you'll call this match map with the location that has come from the top, the router, and your like props. Your prop is nothing but your current path that you have. Then if there is a match, right, then that's what. So this is kind of an advanced version, like where you support like multiple React patterns. So either like you can check if it is a function, then trigger that function, or if it's a child element, render the child element, or if it's a component, then create a component and like render it. So this is kind of a pattern. So this is what the entire routing solution would look like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think yeah, anything we have.
I have something on like a few issues with client-side routing, but I would open this question to everyone. What are the common issues we face on a client-side routing approach, and how we go ahead to solve those? There's just like a extra add-on. It's out of the like a context, but yeah. As we are discussing on the client-side routing, what are the general issues we face, and how we go ahead about solving those? It's open to everyone. So, Phil.
Yeah, so one issue which I have observed, I'm very new to React, but what I have observed is, let's say if you have a URL and that URL, you have one more URL, like you have two URLs, and one URL is basically kind of like subset of the first one. So it's little bit hard to map those URLs. So yeah, that one challenge, maybe like you have to change the order, or you might have to pass some extra parameter like exact true in React Router.
You are specifically talking about there is a router.match or some method. I forgot the name. And there you have to pass this exact true.
Yeah.
They do provide the API. I don't know like how better that can be solved, because in a URL you can have a dynamic parts, and you can say like you have a parent route, you have a child route, and when you want to match, you might be wanting to match that. I gave an example of ID, right? A colon ID can be a dynamic part of it, but you don't know the colon ID, so you just want to check whether it's a catalog page, and the catalog ID you don't care about. So that time you need to have a partial match. But if you want, if you know the catalog ID, that time you need to do the exact match. So they do provide the API, but yeah, like that is expected. So as a user, I do need both type of checks to do in my application.
Yeah.
One very funny and major problem with the client-side routing is displaying 404 page with 200 status code.
Mm-hmm.
So because how the client-side routing works, whenever you request on the server, it renders a index.html, and on the client side, you check whether that URL matches to any route or not, and based on that, you show a specific page. And if it doesn't match any page, you show the 404 page. So the biggest problem here is like you might see like as a user you will see 404 page, but the crawler, it's a problem with the crawlers. Like the crawler will still see it as a 200 status page, and they will keep indexing it. So one like if you are doing server side rendering, then it's a straightforward thing, because in a server side rendering you are hitting the same route, and you know like whether that route is available or not. So in a server side rendering, server side rendered page, it is not a problem. Mostly it is a problem when you are just relying on the client side application. So Next.js and all of those are server side rendered page, so it's not a problem there. One thing people do is like create a manifest of route beforehand during the build time, and on your server, it can be a Lambda server or any server which serves that index HTML, to match that route first there and see like whether this is a valid route or not. And if it is a valid route, then return an index HTML. If it is not a valid route, return an index HTML, but with a status code 404. So you have to figure out the route beforehand during the build time. You have to create that manifest, or like manually you can create also. You can create a regex based mapping that this regex are valid routes, and on your Nginx level or your whatever server you have, on that you can check like whether this is a valid route or not, and based on that you can pass proper specific status codes. I really wish that there should be some way to hint on the client side only, like now engines like your search engines are smart enough to crawl your client side rendered page as well, though it is not like a very optimal for SEO. They do miss out few things. So anything which is rendered from a server will definitely have a better SEO than client rendered page. So that's why people follow this both approach, like they have a statically generated page as well for SEO purpose, and the client side application is required for the interactivity, because it has a better pursued experience. But what I was mentioning is like there should be some way, browser should put some way where on a client side only we can tell that this is the expected status code, because now most of the application are going toward this client side application. So there should be a way from the browser itself to hint that though it rendered with a 200 status code, but it is a 404 page, so don't index it. But sadly that's not there is no API available as such.
And Sudhanshu, I think, yeah. So with the older routing solutions, right, like where we had static routes defined like initially, so then it was like, I mean, pretty easy to like handle because like you'll just, but do we have like anything similar in the, I mean, did you come across or anyone has come across? Because here the routes will be like dynamic, right? You will not be knowing like where you will add a new route. So do we have any like manifest library which will create this like manifest or like runtime while building?
I have a just idea, like I don't know how much that will work, but it's just like how the Next.js do, right? If you have a convention, it will extract those things out, and it in a Next.js it exactly knows that what all routes are valid. But in a normal situation, you are defining routes, right? React routers. So you can statically parse your all files, look for those route params, that what all route params are there, and you create your own manifest using those route params. But that would require some insane level of static parsing, because it's not just like one path is not defined just on one file. It is spreaded across files, because you can have child routes, and the child route has to combine with your parent route.
Correct.
So you need to figure out the dependencies between this multiple route. But most of time, if you go ahead and define this regex params for a given application, there aren't much routes. There will be dynamic IDs and all, but the pattern would remain same. The URL would look similar. So you can always define a pattern, static patterns, and every time you are adding a new route, you have to add a static parameter there, right? Same thing we did on HackerRank as well, right? For Nginx, we had a use case, different use case, where we had to render backbone page versus a React page, and we had to figure out like what is a backbone page, what is a React page. So we maintained our own regex for URLs, like a object for mapping for a URLs, that this is a React page types. So similarly, we can do for even this particular use case, that you create this regex instead of defining actual routes.
Yeah.
One problem we had faced is with like forms. Okay, so let's say there are forms with like what do you say, step 1, step 2, step 3, right? And we also wanted to add a like confirmation prompt. Let's say if you try to close it, we'll show that do you want to really close it, right? So that is fine. Let's say you add that on like window or something, like before unmount it, like before closing the tab, it calls that is fine. But the second thing is, now you also have some active links within your application, right? So I can, let's say I am on /forms, and now I can click on /app, right? Then also you want to show that kind of a confirmation. But your form also has a few valid states, right? Like your form can go from form/1 to form/2, right? That should not show any prompt. But if you go from /form to some other route, basically using some other link that is there, then you have to show it, right? But these things, right, because these are like client side URL changes, right? Your browser will not trigger that same API, which it triggers when you are trying to close a tab, right?
Yeah.
So basically you have to maintain it in like a lot of places, and yeah.
This is where Bharat showed within history API, we have this valid, some method is right, like where we check whether transition is valid. So you can provide hooks where you check like whether whatever navigation is happening from page 1 to page 2, whether that is a valid or not. If it is not valid, return false or redirect to any other page. You can handle on those cases. So you will have to define those listeners.
Right.
You'll have to block the transition. So.
And you have to block the transition. Like you have to return false after that.
Yeah, but let's say if you want to show that do you really want to go, right? And if you press yes, again you have to actually retry that. Like it has a retry method as seen. So maybe you have to again do that change actually.
So for this, actually this should come on a history API itself. It should be more promise based instead of instead of like a synchronous thing. So if it is a promise based, you can probably say like await this confirm util, confirm from a user that do you really want to get proceed, and then it should return true or false based on awaited thing. But the history API itself is not written in a supporting async programming. Probably there should be like probably we can propose something that support async, that should be async thing. The valid check should be async method.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One more problem we get is accessibility. So this is another big problem. Like whenever you do a server-side navigation, like a server-side in the sense, if you're navigating from page 1 to page 2, the whole page gets like the previous page, the whole page changes. So all those screen reader properly announce it. But with the client-side routing, what happens, like you're just changing a part of a content. Screen reader doesn't know that something has been changed, and user might get lost in between, like they just clicked some link and then they don't know what happened. So there is one, I'll actually share an article. There is one article written by Gatsby, making client-side route accessible. So what people do is, like whatever new element is there, right? You just bring focus, like you trigger a focus event on the element which just came, the container element of the newly created element. So user will know, like, okay, the screen reader will announce that this is a new element where you got focused. And there is also some ARIA property for this called ARIA Live, where you can define, like some of the content of this block is live. So if anything changes on it, announce it. But using ARIA Live, we should be very careful, because let's say you are having some counter in that. And so what will happen if you have ARIA Live, and in set interval, if you are changing the counter, it will announce every counter. So you have to be very careful that you shouldn't be having this ARIA Live thing in any random place. So the best approach is usually the focus thing, that you bring the focus on the newly created element. But yeah, I'll definitely share the resource. Any other problem? Like, we are already out of time, but given that we spent some time on the nonsense of Zoom bomb, people can share their experience, like what they faced on a client-side routing thing.
So I have a problem. If I am creating a library that uses client-side routing, and it is like the client-side routing is happening in the library, and I want the user to also have client-side routing on the app. So this way we are going to have two instances of the router. So what is a good way to prevent that? Like, should I export the whole routing things from my library and tell the user to use my exported router instance in the whole application to get my library working? Or will the two instances of the router do fine?
Yeah. So yes. So basically, there is a two part. One is your history. One is your router. Like today, Bharat showed two parts, right? History API, history library, and the router library. Router library, you can have as many as library you want within an application. Like you can. It's usually not a good practice. You should have one routing library, so things are handled properly. But you can have, but the history implementation should be same. Like there, if you have a multiple instance of your browser history, things might not work as expected. So you can use the same history API, like a React router even provide a way that on router you can provide your history object. You can provide the same history object on your library as well. So you can have both router library, but provide the same history object, singleton instance of a history in both of the router library.
Yeah. To add on to this, I think that's what, even in the API that I just showed you, right? So the router, like we were like manually passing the history from outside. So ideally, there should be like one-to-one mapping between the history object that you're creating and your browsing context. And then if we like have multiple history object, then there might be a scenarios where like the different routers will be like referring to the different histories, and like there will be like unwanted behaviors. Yeah.
Yep. Anything else? So what I will do, I'll add I'll create a repository on the internals link, the GitHub link. I will add all the resources which I know, and probably you people can also share resource if you have. I'm not able to find that Gatsby URL right now, but I will share that.
Also, I would like to share one thing. I'm not sure if you guys know about it, but if anyone has seen dev.to website, like Bharat, you just wrote a blog post on it, right? On dev.to.
Yeah, yeah.
So dev.to basically is not a single page application, but if you use their application, it feels like it is a single page application. And the way they have done it is using, so they have divided their website into header, footers, and two sidebars. And what basically they do is they cache header, footers, and sidebars into a service worker. And whenever you navigate to any URL, all these sections are served from the service worker. And that way it feels like, it's a single page application. Only the contents that are shown in the middle, like the listing of the blog posts and the details of the blog post, only that part is dynamic. And the rest of the contents are basically static, served from the service worker. So it actually, the entire overall experience is, it feels like it is a single page application, although it's not.
Got it. Yeah, and it makes sense for all the blog content sites, right? Because the major portion of your website is dynamic, like dynamic in the sense, not dynamic in a way it changes frequently. It's more of a your blog content takes the maximum space. So there, if you do like a client-side navigation, you will not get the best of the client-side application, right? Because whenever you're navigating, you are showing a big loader on between, and then you are just changing the content. Versus in a like a more of a Flipkart type of, or like a more of an enterprise type of application where you have to change a small subset of content. You may or may not change a large set of content. So there, having client-side routing helps you a lot.
Yeah.
And in this, this trick is completely valid. Like just store the header, footer, and those on service workers.
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty cool, like to use.
And at the same time, like you don't get with the complexity of a client-side application, which is like you don't have to worry about SEO or any of those.
Yeah, correct.
Cool. Then
so I have a small question. So there's something called Reach Router. So there are different libraries for routing. So how is Reach Router different from React Router, or how does it manage?
So I think the Reach routers tried to solve the accessibility problem. The React router was not very good at that. But I think now the React router 6 or something, they also added something for the accessibility. I'm not sure how much different they are, but generally all the Reach UIs or like a Reach router, they provide a smaller API and they let you build something on top of it. Versus this React router, it's a full-fledged routing solution. I have to check like what is actual difference, but
I think they announced that they will merge later.
They will
React
merge.
router.
Yeah. They will be same from the version 6.
Okay. Got it.
I have like quoted it from their website in the chat.
Also, like it is interesting to see, like Sudhanshu mentioned about this ARIA Live and all, right? So do they like Reach router, like will they use will they give us these kind of functionality as well? Like I'll have a look into it after this. Like, I mean, dig into their code and see if
Oh, I got the URL, Gatsby URL. I'll just share here. Go through this blog. This is a very good article on. This is more on how they tested accessibility, but they have also spoken about like what are the different problem with the accessibility with the client-side routing. Cool then. Thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for joining. I will upload the recording of the session on YouTube, and I'll share over the Meetup channel, Meetup group, and also on Twitter.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thanks to you guys.
Thanks for sharing
you.
this.
Thank you
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you guys. Thanks, Bharat, for the session.
Thank you.
Thanks both of you, Sudhanshu and Bharat.